Welcome to Tax Practice in Depth, which is part of our Be Insightful training program, membership program. Today's session is Building and Managing a High Performance Remote Tax Practice. My name is Gary D. Hart, and I am the host, and our presenter is Christine Gervais, CPA and co-founder of Cultivate Consulting. She will also present her bio or introduce herself about our membership program. It's called Be Insightful, features exclusive webinars and training opportunities from various speakers like Christine, Murph, Janelle Sikora, who does our marketing for us, as well as others. And you can gain up to about 36 hours of CPE. Each one of these webinars also has a workshop following the webinar, typically within the week or so, where you can sit down and talk to the speaker and ask them questions about the topic they spoke about, or just other things that may be impacting your firm that's within kind of their knowledge base. If you want to learn more, just click yes, and we'll send you some information. We do have one other poll question. We are hosting a top 100 celebration party basically during Scaling New Heights next month. It's about 1 month away on Monday night of Scaling New Heights. This is it's open to all attendees for Scaling New Heights. It does have a fee. I think it's maybe $25. So if you are going to Scaling New Heights, let us know. We will send you some information about that.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm going to give you guys a second plug for that Scaling New Heights Top 100 party. It's a great networking opportunity. I have met some amazing people at that event, so make sure that you get yourself registered. All right, now the hardest part of the day, I am going to, give me just 1 second, get my screen shared, making sure that we share the right one. There we go. And get our slide deck started. All right, perfect. And let me just make sure that I pull up the chat in the Q&A box for all of you. Let's see. And I'm just going to keep these open over here so that if you do have any questions, please feel free to pop them into. I don't know if the chat is open. It looks like it's not. So make sure that if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into that Q&A box, and I will keep an eye on that as we go through the presentation today and try to make sure that I'm answering all of those questions for you as real time as I possibly can. So thanks for being here. We are talking about building and managing a high performance remote tax practice today, and we're going to get into all the nitty gritty of what that means, what those considerations are. I'm excited to be here. If we have not had a chance to meet, I have been running my own practice since 2016. And I was about to say 2009 because it's been 9 years, but it's been since 2016. And I will tell you that we went fully remote during the pandemic, during 2020, kind of as an accident, like so many other people at the time. Our lease on our physical office space was due to renew in May of 2020. And if you remember, that was right in the height of everybody's social distancing and not physically going to places. So we didn't renew our office lease, and we were doing what everybody else was doing at the time. We were trying to figure out, how do we remotely serve our clients to the best of our ability? Long story short, we never went back to having a physical office space when things kind of started to go back to normal post-pandemic. We had spent so much time at that point developing our tech stack and our processes and our procedures to be able to serve our clients remotely. What we realized was that we were able to provide a lot higher quality service more efficiently and to more clients that needed it by not having a physical office space and not having a lot of the, I guess, boundaries, you could say, that a physical office space creates. And we're going to talk about a lot of those things today, but also the challenges of a remote practice and how you deal with those. So that's just kind of like giving you some context as to my background, that this is actually how we run our practice on a day-to-day basis. So if there's anything that I don't address for you as we're going through this today, please feel free to ask. It just means that I didn't manage to fit it into our slide deck for today, but I probably have an answer for you, or at least a direction to point you in. So why are we talking about running a remote practice? Who cares? What does it matter? We're going to talk about some of those things today too, but Practically, there's a lot of benefits to doing this. And if you're here and you're not a fully remote practice, maybe you want to be, or maybe you're just trying to figure out how to have some type of a efficient hybrid model in place, and that's okay too. A lot of the things that we're going to talk about today will lend themselves also to running a hybrid practice, which is some combination of physical in person, as well as maybe some work from home opportunities. So you can marry these things together as well. We happen to run a fully remote practice, but again, you can kind of pick and choose what is going to be the best fit for you from some of the things that we're going to talk about today. So hopefully at the end of this is, our goals for today is implementing remote hiring strategies. So we're going to talk about what it means to interview somebody remotely. How do you choose the right fit for people when you're not actually meeting with them in person? How do you manage that remote team effectively when you're not seeing somebody face to face every single day, when, they're not able to just pop into your office? How do you integrate remote work technology? So, how do you find the right tech stack that's going to support a remote practice and everybody having the information that they need, including your clients? And how do we leverage AI to boost efficiency? So, I talk about AI a lot now. We use AI in a bunch of different capacities within our practice. We've done a ton of different webinars, not just me, but other great speakers on the Insightful Accountant YouTube channel and on the website have done a lot of articles and webinars at this point on AI in your tax and accounting practices. So if you haven't spent time to dive into all of those, I'm not going to ask that we put all the links to those up because there's so many now, but I would just go on the website or the YouTube channel and search for AI and look at some of the various topics that come up with how to leverage AI in your practice. And I'll give you a couple of tools today too that I think are helpful for some of the things that we're talking about. So the reason this is so important is because a lot of what we're seeing in terms of the hiring market, so this isn't just your client perspective, but a lot of this is being driven by your staff perspective. 56% of companies, this is US based, are offering some type of remote environment now. So that might not be fully remote, it might be some type of hybrid combination, but more than half of all US companies are offering some type of a remote option. So this is really an expectation now in 2025 that there is these hybrid models being offered and available. 40% of new job offers last year were remote. So that's a huge portion of jobs that were hired for last year had remote capabilities. 98% of workers want some type of remote time. So again, that might be a hybrid model, but that means that almost 100% of who you're talking about in an interview process is expecting to have some type of a remote environment, even if it's part-time work from home. So this is important for us as practitioners to take very seriously. And again, we'll talk about the benefits of what it does when you can hire remotely, but you have to really practically understand that from the perspective of running the business and continuing to be able to staff your firm into the future, that this is the direction that we are going in. So if you're not already looking at this and at least talking about how do I build in remote capabilities for the future, even if you're not doing it right now, you're behind the ball to not at least be having the conversation, which is why this topic is so relevant for us. And then professional services have a higher remote adoption rate than other industries. That's probably not a surprise. You think about things like, manufacturing and retail, they don't lend themselves as well to a remote environment, maybe for certain positions, but certainly not for all of them. Whereas professional services and the tech stack that we have available to us now, that really does make it a lot easier when we have the right support systems in place. There's really no reason why I have to be physically sitting in front of my clients or physically sitting in front of my team. And of course, there's challenges that come with that, what we're going to try to address today as well. So what is the reality of remote? We have to look at this for talent acquisition strategies, and I'll talk more about this, but why limit yourself geographically to a talent pool that's within, 20 to 50 miles of a physical office space when you could not have any limit to your talent pool whatsoever. We are going to talk about technology and security infrastructure. This becomes incredibly important, especially the security piece, which I'll kind of harp on a little bit more towards the end, but we're going to talk about cybersecurity risks and the increase in cybersecurity risks when we are running a fully remote practice and things that you as a practitioner just need to keep in mind. We already talked about AI. We'll address that a little bit more as later on as well, risk management considerations. And we're going to talk about managing your team and how to make sure that people in a remote environment are thriving. So I told you guys that we're fully remote. There is no hybrid model, meaning that our team almost is never all in the same room. We do have opportunities where some of us can be, but we will almost never have an opportunity where 100% of us are in the same place at the same time, physical location wise. So, how do we create relationships and drive a good remote work culture that is going to create a positive working environment that people want to stay in when you don't have, that face-to-face interaction? So talking about the current state of remote work, let me see if I can just get this to pop up. Oop, there we go. 78% of professionals prefer a remote hybrid work environment. That means, again, most of the people that you are interviewing. So if you are looking to fill a position, if you're looking to create a new position, you need more staff members on the team. Frankly, every accountant I talk to is understaffed at this point. All of us have more work than we can actually handle on our plates. And there's fewer and fewer options in terms of people that are coming into this space and looking for work. So that is shrinking our talent pool all by itself. We don't do ourselves any favors if we further shrink that talent pool by geographic location. So you are going to create a competitive advantage for talent acquisition if you are offering some type of hybrid or fully remote environment. Fully remote, obviously, a little bit expanded from the hybrid model, just being that even in a hybrid model, there's usually some type of expectation that maybe you're in the office 2 or 3 days a week. So that might expand your geographic location a little bit. Maybe people are willing to drive a little further if it's only a couple of days a week. But generally speaking, my team member that is out in Texas is not looking for a hybrid model. She's not coming into the office in Maine 2 days a week. So clients expect more remote capabilities. I still every once in a while see the clients that are like, we really want to come meet you face to face. We really want to come into your office. Can we just meet with you in person? We are very, very clear with our clients that that's just not our business model, that we do everything remotely, and that we totally understand if that's not something that they're comfortable with. And then we have some great other firms that we will recommend to them that might be a better fit. We want everybody coming in to be happy, and we want the expectations to be clear. So that's another thing that we'll kind of talk about in a little bit more detail is client communication, but you want to really make sure that you are setting a very clear expectation of your clients. It doesn't work if you're trying to go down a remote practice model and then you're telling your clients that everything can be in person. You have to really move the needle on the boundary with your clients, because they're going to want to come into an office all the time. Your team's not going to be there. And now you're going to bottleneck yourself being the one that's having all these in-person meetings, which sort of defeats the purpose of the remote environment. So you have to really just kind of think about vision wise, what does that look like with your client relationships? Does that work for your client relationships? As I said, we made the transition during the pandemic, and so it sort of naturally happened on its own. And it wasn't as much of a shock to our clients when we just didn't get an office back at any point in the future. And so now it's a lot easier for us to just present ourselves as a fully remote firm. But if you're going from an in-person firm to a remote environment, that's something that you're going to have to do in stages, and you're going to have to manage those client relationships. But it also expands your ability to offer new services or to new clients and new locations. And we'll talk about some of that too when we talk about profitability. Scalability, I mentioned this already. I'm going to keep mentioning it. I believe that this is absolutely 100% necessary for strategic growth of every accounting firm. This is the way of the future. The technology is already there for us to be able to do it. This is certainly the expectation of younger staff, and it's becoming the expectation of younger clients as well. So, in order to scale and continue to grow into the future, you have to be having a conversation about some type of a remote or hybrid environment. So we talked about a lot of this already, but some of the benefits of the talent pool, not just that it's expanded, but it creates the ability to potentially improve the work-life balance for your team. And that's really important in our industry, especially when we're talking about tax practices, because so much of the accounting industry is being squeezed right now by talent shortages. And then it makes it worse even still in the tax side of things because I think that that talent pool is squeezed even further. So you might have more people coming into the accounting side still, but it's very, very difficult on the tax side in terms of what we have available in the talent pool. And you just don't want to limit yourself geographically. But the other thing that limits naturally in the industry is that expectation that everything is just really long hours, really stressful environment. People don't want to do that anymore. They are looking for improved work-life balance. So if you're able to create that by creating a hybrid work model and flexibility in hours, that's going to also give you a competitive advantage over practices that are not doing that. Client service flexibility. So, as I mentioned, you might be able to serve clients in a different geographic location. You might also be able to offer other services that you couldn't before. I think that if we were still doing in-person meetings with a lot of our clients, it would significantly shrink the number of hours that I have available every day to go from meeting to meeting. Not that I'm going to be a huge proponent of 8 straight hours of Zoom meetings, but it is more efficient when you are staying in one place and you can have some of those meetings back to back as opposed to maybe having to drive from location to location or having to sort of like reset the office between clients all of the time. It does make it a little bit more flexible in terms of how much time you're able to spend with your clients and having conversations. That might expand your ability to offer advisory services, tax planning services, because you're eating up less time with some of those in-person meetings. And then there's reduced overhead costs. So there are costs obviously of running a remote practice that are going to take the place of things like a physical office and physical furniture, but you are going to not have the cost of actually running a physical office space, maintaining a physical office space, et cetera. So, what are we looking at in terms of your hiring strategies? I think you need to be really careful about this if you're looking at a fully remote environment, even if you're just looking at a hybrid environment, to be perfectly honest with you. Hiring somebody, and then we're going to talk about managing your team remotely as well. But hiring a team that you are not physically in front of every day is a very different thing than someone that you are having a face to face interaction with 5 days a week. So you want to sit down and really think about the vision for this and what the structure of it needs to be, should be. And that includes technology capabilities. In other words, like what tech stack needs to be in place in order for these people to do their job every day, in order for us to communicate appropriately. What are the job requirements and expectations? And this might look a little bit different than an in-person position, meaning that you might need to have more definitions and boundaries around um, what are like how long are they supposed to be taking on certain projects, what hours are they supposed to be working, how is their time tracked, how is their performance evaluated. That's some of the next questions that I have on the slide that we get into here. So you need to think about those things because it's not going to be an apples to apples. If you're used to running an in-person practice, the way that you hire and manage these team members is not going to be the same in a remote environment. And then evaluating communication. So adapting your management style for the fact that you're not in person every day. You should have a set cadence of communication. So where people tend to have less structure around communication when you're just bumping into somebody every day or you have an open door policy. You have to really define a lot of that in a lot more detail in a remote environment. When you are interviewing someone and you are trying to evaluate whether or not this is someone who's going to work well in a remote environment, communication is probably the number one piece that you want to be looking at in terms of how is this person communicating. So you want to really be prepared with an in-depth list of interview questions when you talk to them. You don't want that to be a short interview because this is really going to be your only time to evaluate that person's personality. It's harder to do on video than it is in person. You probably want to have an interview structure that's going to include multi layers of interviews, meaning that they might have a second and third interview with other people on your team that they might be working with, because it's just going to be a little bit more challenging via video to truly analyze their communication style and their personality fit. How well are they going to fit into our team culture? And those things are still important, even if you're not in the same physical location every single day. And they're probably going to be communicating with clients also remotely. So you really have to look at their written skills, their verbal skills. How do they show up on video? Same thing as if they come into the office. Are they showing up on time? Do they look presentable? Are they prepared? So those are all things that you want to sit down and have a structure for to make sure that you're able to evaluate those as part of the hiring process and that they're going to be a good fit for your team culture, and that you also want to have a remote onboarding process in place. So I think one of the worst things that we can do in any onboarding situation is that somebody shows up for their first day and we're complete chaos, right? Like we don't know where their laptop is, they can't access anything, they just don't even know where it is that they're supposed to start. They can't log into their email. We're calling IT. So again, we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a couple of minutes, but you really want to make sure that you have built your remote onboarding program so that everything is ready for their first day. That means mailing them a laptop in a lot of cases, and making sure that they have the ability to sign into everything that they're going to need. So that usually is a little bit more upfront, excuse me, than what we might be used to with an in-person environment. And we're going to talk a lot about data security in a couple of minutes as well. So let's take a second for our first polling question. Which of the following is the most important when you are evaluating candidates for remote tax positions? And of course, this is an opinion piece, but I think that there's a right answer. We'll just give everybody a couple of minutes to make sure you get a chance to answer that. And just to reiterate and remind you that if you are looking to get CPE, we do need you to make sure that you're answering at least 3 polling questions. All right, we'll give that about 5 more seconds. Pop your answers in there. All right, we'll go ahead and keep going. Okay. So I think I mentioned it, but I am going to go out on a limb and say that communication, I think, is the most important piece when we are evaluating those remote positions, is we just really want to focus on their communication style. Previous remote work experience might be a great one as well. Other things that you want to ask is, are they available during traditional business hours? If that's something that's important for their position, it might not be. But those are some of the considerations that you're going to want to make sure that you are looking at when you are hiring. So remote interview best practices, consider a technical skills assessment. So again, because you can't necessarily meet with somebody face to face in person, you might want to consider actually asking them to take some type of a skills assessment. A lot of hiring platforms offer these for free or for really cheap dollars right now. Meaning that you can build this into them submitting their resume, where they might have a couple of quiz questions that they have to take, and that might help give you a leg up in terms of assessing somebody's technical abilities. Talk about the tech stack that you're using for your remote environment. Ask them how familiar they are with it. talk about the tax software that you're using. Are they familiar with Teams? Are they familiar with Zoom? Are they familiar with whatever else you might be using for communication during the day, Slack messages maybe. Not that those are necessarily deal breakers, but you do want to kind of get a feel on that hiring process of, how um, plug and play is somebody going to be with the tech stack that we're using. And of course, ask if they have any remote working experience. That's also going to tell you how to best manage someone. If somebody has no remote working experience, you are going to have even more structure in place to assess how they're doing, how they're developing, if they're getting things done on time. They're probably going to need a little bit more structure at the get go in terms of task management, whereas someone that has a lot of remote work experience might not need as much of that structure put into place for them. They might be a little bit better about developing it on their own. Always going to recommend reference checks again, especially because you're not meeting with this person face to face. Getting good references is going to be helpful in that interview process. And as I already mentioned, I do think it's a great idea to try to have a longer interview or multiple interviews to really give you the opportunity to assess their oral communication. And then you can consider some type of a written assessment as well. So, same thing in line with those technical skills assessments. Maybe ask for someone to write a business email that responds to a client specific question or a specific situation to help you assess their written skills, also. That's a really big thing in a remote environment. We do encourage our team members to get on quick video calls with each other to answer questions and to problem solve with things, but a lot of our communication is written, instant message style. We use Teams. I know a lot of people use Slack. So you want to make sure that somebody is going to be able to be an effective communicator in writing in various different scenarios as well. And you need the opportunity to assess if their personality is going to align with your culture. You might want to ask some behavioral style questions. How would you handle certain situations? How do you best like to be managed? Just to make sure, again, even though you're not in person with everybody every day, culture fit is still incredibly important. I actually think it might be more important in a remote environment because you have to work so much harder to have that team relationship be developed with people, that interpersonal relationship. What you really don't want is somebody that's completely misaligned with your company culture coming in and sort of like, bombing you in team videos or team meetings with this just not great personality fit. So that's something that you want to try to assess to the best of your ability in the hiring process. When it comes to managing remote teams, this is kind of the next step of the equation. We found some great people. We started our remote practice journey, and now we have to figure out how we're going to manage our workload as well as how are we going to manage all of these team members. This looks very, very different than it does in an in-person setting. And we want to try to mirror some of the in-person setting things in a remote environment. Some of them I think we can throw out. I actually don't like open door policies. I think that they're incredibly inefficient, but you do have to create some type of access. So, in a remote environment, I think that importantly, you just have to make sure that you have really good structure, really good written process and procedure in place for pretty much everything. So, starting with onboarding, we talked about this, that pre-start tech setup. You do not want to be this person that hires someone for a remote position. It's their first day of work and their laptop that you're sending them is still in the mail and FedEx isn't going to deliver it for 3 more days. That's not a great way for somebody to show up on their first day. It's not a great feeling for the new hire. It's not a great feeling for you. Now you're paying this person and they're not doing anything. So you just want to make sure that you have a system in place to identify what is it that they need and how do we get it to them in advance to make sure that they're ready to go and they feel welcome on that first day. Consider building some type of a digital welcome package. We right away I have this as a bullet point on there too, early introduction to team meetings. We right away, when we hire someone, bring them right into our weekly team meetings. We have We do ours weekly. They're very brief, but they are once a week, and that's everybody's opportunity to sort of remotely check in with each other. And that way, when somebody brand new comes on board, they get to meet the team right away. They have that immediate first day feeling of being welcomed by everybody. People can then send them messages in teams and say, hey, welcome to the team, glad that you're here. So it sort of creates that camaraderie that you would get if you were maybe like walking around the office for the first day and meeting everybody. Highly, highly, highly recommend that you assign every remote team member a mentor. So this, in a small practice, is probably going to be you as the practitioner. If you have some other management level individuals that can help you, assigning everybody a mentor doesn't necessarily need to be technical skill oriented. You really just want them to have someone available to them who has been with the practice a little bit longer, who kind of knows the ropes a little bit more, that can make them feel like they have access, someone to go to if they're just not sure how something is working or they're feeling lost or whatever it might be. I think that you don't need a ton of structure around this, but maybe setting some guidelines of mentors should meet with their mentees, once a month or something along those lines. Here are things that you should be talking to your mentor about. So the reason I said I don't like an open door policy is I do find them incredibly inefficient. Like, I love my team to death, and they will ask me questions throughout the day, and they know that I will answer them as soon as I have the ability to do so. I don't want all of them to feel like they can hit the call button to call me every 5 minutes throughout the day. And that's kind of what happens in that open door policy in an office. So I do think you want to put some structure around that of like, hey, maybe we have some office hours where you can talk to leaders, talk to managers about something specific. Maybe we have regular check in times, or you have your mentor that you can talk to. So creating that structure is just going to make sure that people feel like they have someone to go to, and that open door policy sort of exists, but without the inefficiency. You also have to consider your time and your project tracking. This might not need to change all that much from your in-person environment. If you're already using tech stack for this, this is probably just something that people can access on a cloud basis, and people are able to see what their project and their tasks are supposed to be. But you do want to make sure that that structure is in place. So if you're running a practice right now that's sort of a little willy-nilly with your task management, maybe you don't have task management software in place. Maybe you're doing a lot of tracking of things still on spreadsheets. That's a scenario where I would say you probably want to look at implementing some type of a task management CRM style type system, because it's just going to make your life more difficult if you start having remote team members that you have to manage, people that you don't talk to every single day, and you don't have strong task management in place. And then training and feedback, you want to really make sure, again, that this is very clearly defined, that there's a structure in place for this. A lot of firms will have this type of structure in place, even if you're in person. But you, I think, need this even more clearly defined when it's remote, because it's easy for us to be sort of out of sight, out of mind with things. And you don't want to necessarily micromanage your remote team members, but if they're not in front of you every day, you could go a whole week worrying about your own work, your own responsibilities, and never think, oh, I haven't checked in with Sarah this week. A lot of times I see the assumption of like, if I don't hear from Sarah, then I assume that Sarah's doing fine. And maybe she's not. Maybe she's just not afraid to ask questions. So we have certainly learned in the management of our own remote team that having regular check-ins and very clearly defined goals and phased training is very, very important, just to make sure that we have a good understanding of where someone's skills are at, what they're capable of doing versus not doing, and that we're not leaving them in that project space of like, we think that they're operating just fine because they haven't said anything, and that's not really the case. So we talked about a lot of this already. I'm not going to rehash it. The slides are available to you, and we'll make sure that they get sent out. So if you want to go through these in any more detail, along the lines of the mentorship, peer learning opportunities, team social opportunities. So I think that that's really important too when you're talking about culture and developing that company culture. This was so fun. Right before Christmas this year, we did a virtual company Christmas party. We paid this company to do this online game with us. So there's a bunch of different websites out there now that offer fun remote team experiences. This one was like a trivia game, so everybody got to participate in this trivia. It was a Christmas themed trivia game. We were all on Zoom, but everybody was there. It was around lunchtime, and we told everybody, grab your favorite snacks. This is very casual, and we played trivia, and everybody had a ton of fun. So that was an opportunity where we just got our team together for not work, but actually to just like enjoy each other's company. And those types of relationship forming activities go a long way, especially when they're not seeing each other on a regular basis. The digital learning library, I just want to mention really quickly. I think that this is an important key to think about in a remote environment too. In an we we have a really good ability to silo our knowledge. I think that, we're so busy all the time. Every accountant is busy, and we can kind of easily forget that we have to knowledge share with other people on the team. And that is less of a concern in a physical office space because, again, you're seeing people, you're sort of naturally having conversations with them, things will come up. But in a remote environment, that's not the case. And so I found that knowledge sharing can become even less likely to happen naturally in a remote environment. So you might want to consider creating a digital learning library. And what that is, that could be your internal SOPs, it could be how to use your tech stack, it could be a research project that someone did for a specific scenario on a specific client that now is in this digital learning library in case anyone else needs to access it. But creating some type of a bank of information sharing that people understand, what do I put in here? When do I put something in here? What is in here? How do I access it? Is going to help alleviate some of that knowledge being siloed into where people are not talking to each other, just in natural conversation on a daily basis. Okay, let's switch gears just for a minute, and we'll kind of talk a little bit more about tech stack and risk management. So in a remote environment, so much of even in-person offices now is driven by technology, but you have to really, really assess your technology infrastructure when you're talking about being fully remote because there's no paper. I keep using this hypothetical person, Sarah, but when I hire Sarah, Sarah doesn't have a laptop at her house. She doesn't have a printer at her house. She might not even have a desk at her house. So those are all things that you need to think about in terms of what do people need to have access to. And then in terms of compliance, all of us should have WIS plans in place. If you don't have a WIS plan in place, this is another topic that I know that we've done a couple of different webinars on. I think that there's a downloadable WISP guide also on the website. So go out to the Insightful Accountant website and type in WISP in the search bar and go see what resources are already available to you in terms of putting your WISP in place. But that's one that you definitely need to have. We actually require all of our team members to read the WISP plan on an annual basis and sign off that they've read it, that they've understood it. Data security, you absolutely need to have data security in place. We're going to go into depth on cybersecurity in a minute, as well as insurance considerations, which might vary when you have a fully remote team. So just kind of touching on AI for a minute, some of the ways that AI can really help support your practice. And this is true even if you're not running a remote practice right now. And again, as I mentioned, I would absolutely go search our site for some of the other AI webinars and articles that have been put out. But automated data extraction, initial return review, these are all things that I've talked about on a couple of different webinars. So you can go find those also on our YouTube channel and get more in depth around like which pieces of AI software I recommend, exactly how do you implement these things. Using it for tax research, tax template build out. That tax template build out can be a great thing to put into your digital library for your team. That might be things like a client received a notice and it's notice number, CP52 from the IRS. How do we respond to this? There's a template in the library. But using something like a chat GPT or a Claude.ai to help write that initial template, they're really helpful in terms of getting past that initial writer's block or just sort of getting your team pointed in the right direction. Can help with skills gap. So client query response, meaning somebody gets an email, they're not sure how to respond to it. I would never tell our team to solely rely on ChatGPT to respond to clients, but it might help get them part of the way there to kind of get an initial structure of how do I appropriately respond to this question. Routine correspondence as well. So if you're sending out, routine newsletters, routines, communications, reminders, things like that, it might be a great tool to use to have it sort of write those things up a little bit quicker for you. All right, we'll pause for a second and we'll do our second polling question. When implementing AI tools in a tax practice, which application typically provides the highest return on investment in terms of time savings? And we'll give everybody just a minute to answer that. Again, opinion piece. I think I sort of wrote these with more correct answers in mind, but definitely opinion piece. Looking at the answers on my cheat sheet. All right, we'll give it about 5 more seconds. Just a reminder, if you are looking for CPE today, make sure that you're answering these polling questions for us. All right, we'll close that down. I think the most correct answer is the automated data extraction from source documents, but maybe your opinion differs from mine. Just really quickly, in terms of some AI tools that we use and that we love, if you want to look these up after the presentation, I love Loom and Scribe for training purposes. So those are both great tools that can do some recording of you on your screen, a task that you're going through. You can record a video. You can actually talk while you're recording on the screen, and help create that library, that digital library of training for your team. We use fireflies.ai as a note taker, although I know that there's a ton of note takers out, but that has been a lifesaver in a remote environment because we are on constant Zoom and Teams calls. And so having that automatic transcription of the call means that I don't have to transcribe my notes back to my team if I get off the call with a client and we talked about, X, Y, and Z for their tax planning, that the team immediately has access to those notes. We talked about ChatGPT, great to use for SOPs. So when we were talking a minute ago about putting a lot of this structure in place and designing what are your standard operating procedures, which we're going to talk about more in a minute as well, in a remote environment, ask ChatGPT to start to write the baseline for you, and then you can customize from there. But again, great tool if you want to kind of get past that initial writer's block of I don't even know where to start with writing these guidelines. You can kind of get a base in place and then be able to customize for your practice. Those are just a couple little bonus tools that I will give you that I have found helpful. So in terms of risk management, all of us as accountants have a high level of risk in our practices. We do have people's personal information. We are required by law to be protecting it. So we have compliance considerations that are in place regardless of whether or not we're running a remote practice. And we all know that even physical in-person offices are using a ton of technology, and all that data needs to be managed securely. So having that WISP in place, absolutely need to have it. Require routine training of your staff. So not only do we require our staff to read and sign off on the WISP, acknowledging it every single year, we have built-in IT training. We do this through our IT provider. I know a lot of companies offer it now, and it's an online tool where, every couple of months they're required to go through refreshers of cybersecurity type training, how to identify emails that might be spam. And so we are requiring our team to go through that on a regular basis. I believe it's quarterly, as just kind of an enhancement of making sure that we're doing our due diligence to be aware of the risks that are out there and our best to manage and prevent them. you should have a remote working guide and remote asset use. And so what that means is like if your team member is taking their laptop to the beach with them, if your team member has access to Teams or their email on their phones that might contain sensitive client information, what is going to be the company policy? Do they need to be password protected? The answer is yes, they should be. You should make sure that you're requiring those types of things to be password protected. They should require multi-factor authentication. You should have all of this written in sort of the firm policies of like, if you are remotely working, if you have remote use of these assets, even though we're not micromanaging them, they're not sitting in the office every day, we have policies that you need to abide by when it comes to their use and keeping our clients' data secure. Insurance coverage considerations that you want to probably talk to your insurance broker about it. First of all, you should absolutely be having a cybersecurity policy. That's regardless of whether or not you're running a remote practice, but you might need to have an enhanced policy if you have people that are working remotely. So things that we didn't necessarily think about is in the environment where not everybody is in the same physical location, the infrastructure of our IT is not the same at every location. So I might be able to secure my Wi-Fi coming into my office a certain way, but I can't necessarily secure it the same way at Sarah's house where she's working remotely for me. So you need to really have a good conversation with your IT team and with your insurance provider about what that means, what type of coverage needs to be in place to address the fact that you have now remote team members in multiple locations and no IT infrastructure looks exactly the same. That also goes for property and casualty. We had a fun instance come up last year. Everybody was okay, thank God. But unfortunately, one of our team members lived smack dab in the middle of one of the really terrible Florida hurricanes that hit. And of course, we were concerned about her and her family first and foremost. Laptops can be replaced. But for me, as the owner of the laptop, I all of a sudden went, oh, I don't know if that laptop is physically insured because it's not located at our physical main location. And again, we don't have an office. We run fully remotely the practice out of each one of our individual locations. For most of that's our house. A couple of our team members have remote offices they go to. But in either case, I had not had that conversation with our insurance broker to say, hey, is our physical property at these other locations even covered? Turns out they weren't. Everything was fine. It all worked out. It was just a scenario that prompted the question. And so those are things that you need to be thinking about if you're transitioning to a remote environment. All of a sudden, all of your physical assets are not at the same address that they were before. And we talked a little bit about at the beginning about client considerations, communication guidelines, portal communications, and data storage. So when I say communication guidelines, that's probably how you want to guide your team members communicating with clients. If someone's working remotely, like do you care that they answer a client's email at 3 o'clock in the morning, or do we not want people doing that? Do we not want people getting in the habit of texting clients because they're working remotely and they can just do it on their phone on the go? You want to really talk about what those guidelines are and set those clear standards from the get-go of, hey, this is how we communicate and this is also not how we expect you to communicate. Portal communications. So a client portal, if you want all of your information from your clients going there, you want to train them that that's where you want it going there, maybe for security purposes. But again, when everything is remote and everything is in the cloud and we're relying on all this technology, it becomes really easy for people to just grab the thing that's closest to them. A lot of the times that's cell phone, that's text messaging. People have access to their email and their teams 24 hours a day. You want to be clear that you don't expect them to be on that many hours. Like, so all of this stuff, I just really recommend that you think about, that you write down, that you set clear expectations and guidelines. Data encryption. So we actually have guidelines from the IRS around data encryption. We have Bulletin 2019-41. It addresses things like requirements for end-to-end encryption and remote access, multi-factor authentication requirements, access monitoring, secure file sharing, endpoint security. These are all things that should be in your WISP plan. You should be addressing all of this information in your WISP plan for the firm. If you're not, I would go look at this bulletin and compare it to your WISP and see where you might have some gaps that you want to close a little bit, because the IRS is saying to us as tax practitioners, this is the baseline expectation that we are expected to comply with in order to keep our clients' personal information secure. So if you're not familiar with this bulletin, I highly recommend that you go out to the IRS website, read it, ask your IT company for help to make sure that these things are actually being addressed in your WIS and that you know how. And how do we measure success in a remote environment? How do we know that our remote environment is actually, working the way that we intended it to? So you should have visibility into what your team is doing on a daily, weekly basis, but without micromanagement. You shouldn't have to call them every day. And that's where really strong task tracking comes into play. Balanced accessibility, we talked about like how I don't love the open door policy, but you still need to make sure that people know how to access each other, when to access each other. Is that a quick phone call? Is it a quick video chat? Is it instant message, etc.? Remote conflict resolution. What do you do when a problem comes up? That I'm going to 10 times out of 10 tell you that you should do face to face and a video chat as much as possible, but you should really have a plan for how you're going to best address that. It's really easy for conflict to get out of control when people are just sitting behind the screen firing things off to each other. Competency and development framework, that's something that should be written down. How do you know that people are developing? How do you know that people are growing? How do you know that people are demonstrating that they have the skill sets that you hire them for? If you don't have a structure around how to do that assessment, it's going to be one of those things that becomes out of sight, out of mind, and you're going to go 3 months down the road without knowing that someone is dropping the ball on something. And have firm productivity metrics, like what is going to tell you as the owner or the manager that productivity is happening? Is it timeliness of tasks getting completed? Is it somebody's skills being developed? All those things should be really defined, because we can get so siloed and focusing on our own work every day when you're not confronted face to face with talking with someone. All right, hold on just 1 second. Okay. Last polling question. According to IRS Bulletin 2019-41, I didn't give you guys the answer to this, but you can take a good guess if you haven't read it. What is the most critical when establishing a remote tax practice? So again, feel free to offer your opinion, but I do think that there is a more correct answer in these options than some of the other ones. If you haven't read it, don't worry. I think you can still take a good educated guess. And just last reminder, if you're looking for your CPE, go ahead and make sure that you answer these poll questions. We'll give you like 5 more seconds and then we'll wrap it up. All right. We'll move on to our next steps, but I think the most correct answer is the end-to-end data encryption. You guys can go read the bulletin and tell me what you think. So next steps, how do we move on to actually implementing a remote tax practice? So highly recommend that you go back to the Insightful Accountant website and download our tech stack matrix for tax practices. This is accessible to our Be Insightful members. That was a download that we did for a presentation last year. It's pretty in-depth. It talks about software in a variety of different things that you would use it for, different spaces within a tax practice. That tax tech stack matrix, say that 5 times fast, is going to be a great first guide for you taking a look at, do you have the technology even in place to start implementing this? Or if not, that's the place that I would recommend that you start. Design what your remote tax practice should look like. Is it hybrid? Is it fully remote? How long is it going to take you to get there? How's communication going to happen? How are you going to communicate with your clients? How are you going to transition your clients? How are you going to manage your team? So basically, all of the things that we talked about today, but defining them for your practice and what's going to work for you. And then you can build out an implementation timeline. So depending on where you fall on that scale is going to kind of decide how long it will take you to implement this. If the tech stack's already there, maybe you already have some hybrid employees, but you're looking to just kind of transition to even like a more fully remote environment, then that timeline might be a little bit shorter than someone that's just starting their remote journey for the first time today. What do you need for next steps? Create that tech stack list of communication tools, client portals, data and document storage. You need the answers to all of these. How are you going to collect e-signatures? What training technology are you going to use? What's your CRM going to be? What's your remote tax software? How do your staff members access it? Is it a remote desktop? Is it a VPN? Is it cloud based? So you just want to sit down and go through this full list and make sure that we've considered all these aspects and that you have the answers to these questions, because that's going to kind of build that initial foundation, that jumping off point of being able to actually function in a remote environment. And then just the steps that you're going to want to take a look at in terms of making sure that everything is operating the way that it should be, that you have quality controls in place. How do you know that the quality control is, how do you know that the quality of your work is there, that everything is going along the way that it's supposed to be? That the clients are getting what they need, that they're getting a good client experience. Um, how do you know the security is in place? What are the guidelines? Structured AI use, we didn't really talk about, but again, if you go back to some of those AI presentations that we've done in the past, I do have a couple where I talk about setting some very clear written guidelines for your team about appropriate ways and inappropriate ways to use AI in the firm in order to keep your clients' data secure. And then how do you know you're creating a positive company culture? How do you know that you're continuously improving, and what's your profitability and your efficiency look like? So the kind of the point of this remote practice development is to drive efficiency, especially, but also profitability at the end of the day. So do you have the measurement tools in place to measure your profitability and efficiency now versus what will that look like in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months? All right, we are coming right up to the top of the hour. If you have any questions that you didn't ask today or that come up later on and you want to reach out to me, this is my contact information. It'll be in the slide deck. Feel free to reach out with any questions at any time. Like I said, we've been doing this for 5 years now, running a fully remote practice. And I don't always think that we have it all figured out, but we've figured out a lot of things. So as you're going through your remote development journey, if there's anything that I can do to support you, please feel free to ask. And that will take us right to 1 o'clock for today. I appreciate all of you being here, and I look forward to seeing you on our next webinar.